Well, here we are. My name's Steve Smith. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at LiveOak Fiber, and I'm here with my good friend, Lou Martinez.
Vice President of Service Experience.
Service X.
Service X, we call it.
Yeah. Let's talk about Service X.
Sure. What do you want to know?
We didn't call it customer service. We called it Service X.
We call it Service X because it's the service experience, the customer experience, the lifetime experience that they have from the time we start doing work in an area to the time they become our customer to afterwards as we're supporting them as a customer. It's the entire lifetime customer service experience.
Yeah. And that's different than how other companies do it.
It is. They chop it up and they have a construction guy and a service guy and a customer support guy or gal. And here we put it all into one department because we realize it's a continuum.
Yep. And that's a huge differentiator, I believe.
We'd like to think so.
Oh, yeah. So LiveOak Fiber is one of the largest, this project that we're doing here in Okaloosa County, Florida, and Glenn County, Georgia, it's one of the largest infrastructure projects maybe that these counties have ever seen. Outside of roads, this is extensive.
And we're talking about almost $100 million in Okaloosa County, Florida.
Right.
$50 million in Glenn County, Georgia.
Yes.
It's significant investments.
And it's personal, too, because we're not just tearing up like a main street and putting in new water pipes. We're putting fiber into individual homes.
In front of every home and bringing them a service that everybody wants and needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we got here. We've been doing this for about a year, but now things are ramping up. We have a lot of crews. We have crews working in both counties. We have a lot of folks in people's yards. So you and I felt like this is probably a good time to get together and talk about, if I was the customer, what are you doing in my yard?
What are you doing in my yard?
This is it.
And we understand that. There's what we're doing in building this huge infrastructure project can be disruptive. And as you mentioned, we're building this out through residential neighborhoods, which means that we're running infrastructure in front of everybody's home. And that means there's some digging and there's disruption, and we completely understand that. We're sensitive to that, and we work to minimize that as much as possible on a daily basis.
Could you tell us and the people listening a little bit about the process for construction?
Sure. Once we decide that we're going to build an area, we work with the city, submit our designs, and get permits to build in what's considered the right-of-way or the utilities easement in front of a home. That right-of-way or utilities easement can vary widely in size. It can be 5 feet wide. It can be 35 feet wide, which means it could go 35 feet deep into someone's yard.
And most people, I don't even know what my right-of-way or utility easement is at my house. I couldn't tell you.
I don't either.
Okay. It's different, right? But it's different for every locality.
It is different for every locality. And we recognize that at the end of the day, regardless of whether it's a right-of-way or an easement, this is still someone's yard.
Exactly.
That they maintain to the curb. They cut the grass. They have sprinklers. They fertilize it. And we understand we're disrupting that when we're going through there, which is why we try to notify residents before we start working. We initiated a campaign. It's called the Pardon Our Dust campaign, where we put door hangers on people's doors to say, hey, we're going to be coming through. This is what's going to happen. This is who we are and what we're doing. And if there are any problems, call us at this number. That number, by the way, is 1-888-4-LiveOak. And we intentionally made the first extension, option number 1, construction issues. So if anybody ever has a problem while we're doing our construction or has a question, they just call that phone number and hit option 1, and somebody will call them within the same day or next day.
And that has happened since day one.
From day one, we understood the sensitivity of the fact that we are going to be in people's front yards.
And you said we came up with the Pardon Our Dust campaign. Actually, you came up with that. That was a concept that you introduced to us early on and said, this is what I think we should do. This is what I've seen work.
From my experience in past projects, one of the number one sources of frustration has been the lack of communication and response when people are working in front of someone's home, in their front yard.
Right.
And we wanted to minimize that. It's almost impossible to eliminate it, but we wanted to minimize it.
Yep. And let's step back a little bit. You have extensive experience doing this with a lot of companies and brands that people would know of.
Yes, I've worked on projects with all of the major cable and fiber companies across the country, doing this, and being able to do this for my own on my own project and my own company. It's allowed me the ability to fold in all of these lessons that we've learned.
A lot of scars. I know I have a lot of scars.
A lot of battle scars.
A lot of lessons learned, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of lessons learned, and we try to bring that all to home at LiveOak Fiber, because LiveOak Fiber is our home.
It is.
Yeah.
You've done this all over the world, but you went to school on the Florida-Georgia line.
I did. I went to school at University of Florida.
You're a Gator.
Yeah, I'm a Gator. I don't admit that freely when we're in the Georgia market.
I understand.
Yes, obvious reasons. But you're right. I did this not only across the country, but across the world.
It's amazing.
It was fun.
Yeah? What was the craziest thing that ever happened to you in construction? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Probably a infrastructure fire in an electrical manhole that was 40 feet deep in downtown Manhattan that took out the networks of the largest fiber providers in the entire world. And we just had technicians in that hole sawing out melted fiber and power lines with 100 or more people just staring down into this huge, massive.
I was going to say, it's not like they weren't watching you.
Oh no!
Every step.
Oh no! So that was probably one of the craziest things. But we've run fiber down active railways, subways, up skyscrapers, and some of the most difficult parts and some of the easiest parts of the country in the world. It's been fun.
And how does it compare here? It's a different ecosystem. It's different. It's not Manhattan, but it has its own sets of challenges because we're not putting on poles.
Well, we're burying our network,
right?
As you know, and one of the reasons why we bury our network is for resiliency. We are building in two markets that are prone to severe storms, and when you put your lines on telephone poles, they get blown down, they get knocked down. You have to rebuild them constantly. If we put these things underground, it's much more expensive, but we will be able to maintain uptime during these bad weather events between our underground infrastructure and our generator backups, and we won't have to rebuild them every time a hurricane blows through.
Right. And it is storm season right now as we're recording this. In fact, as we're talking right now, Hurricane Idalia just hit a few days ago in the Gulf.
Yep, we lucked out at our Florida market in Okaloosa County, but Glynn County took some damage. But the good thing was that our networks stayed up in both markets at all times.
It did.
Yep, so it worked.
Absolutely. It worked as advertised. So when you build it right, you have to put it in the ground, which has now become full circle. Now we're in people's yards. We're digging holes. We're constructing infrastructure in their yard to make it right. But, there's things that happen. So let's just talk about some common things that are issues.
Things that happen is, we maybe dig a hole in an area that is not ideal for your yard. So hey, you could have put it on the side of my yard and you put it right in front of my front door. So that's something that shouldn't happen. And if that does happen, we look to correct that immediately.
And we've had people call. Again, I go back to the contact number that we have, that mailbox. We've had people call and say, I noticed that you're going to put it here. I remember the one specific example was they had like a boat trailer, and the vault was like right next to the driveway. And the homeowner called you and said, hey, if you would move it, so I'm going to be pulling things over the top of that, which it wouldn't hurt the box, but I mean, you fixed that, right?
Yeah, she was wonderful. She was less concerned about where our box was going from an aesthetic standpoint, and more concerned that she was going to damage our box when she was pulling her trailer out. But either way, if you call us and we can move it off to the side, then we're absolutely going to do that every time.
Every time.
Absolutely. The sooner we know, the better, of course. We prefer to know before we put it in or as we're digging a hole. But if we need to move things in, sometimes we do that.
So they can call that contact number now if they see the Pardon Our Death sign and there's no active construction, but they have thoughts. Like I know that I talked one time with a storage unit out over in Georgia, and this was early on, so we hadn't even started. And she said, I'm paving my driveway. Are you going to be here next week? And I said, no, it'll be several months before we get to you. And she said, do you have any suggestions? And I said, you could put a PVC pipe down your driveway. You want to put a pull string through it. And she said, we'll do that. So people can call in if they have an idea. They can call that exact same number, right?
100%. Very often what will happen is we'll have folks that are curious about what's going to go on. They'll get the door hanger or they'll see the yard signs, the Pardon Our Death yard signs come up. They have the phone number. They have a QR code that leads you to the website and the phone number. And they'll just call and hit the construction issues option number 1 and ask, can you have someone call me and tell me what they're going to do in my neighborhood? Maybe it's because they're curious. Maybe it's because they're planning on doing some work in their yard. Maybe they just did some work in their yard and they want to.
Right.
They're concerned about it. So we field those calls every day. Those calls are typically answered 24/7, and with a response time, usually by next day latest.
Yep. I think that's been the experience so far. If you call in, you're going to get a response.
You're absolutely going to get a response
because you've got your team set up to deal with this, and maybe it's helpful to kind of talk about this organization because we have LiveOak employees, and then we have trusted contractors that we use.
That's right. So we have a team of construction managers and construction coordinators whose main focus, besides production, is quality control and customer and residential outreach. They're there to make sure that the job is going well while they minimize impact to residential neighborhoods. We do have trusted contractors. We have a main general contractor that we use, and they have subcontractors. And so we monitor their efforts and their work closely. And if we see things that we don't like with subcontractors, then we release them so we can make sure that we can maintain the quality standards that.
And we've done that. I mean, we're scoring these crews on a regular basis.
On a regular basis. If we bring a crew in and we see that the quality control is not where we'd like it, we release them. We just released a couple of crews across both markets within the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to do that. And the ones who do great work will be here for quite some time.
Usually the ones that do great work are in great demand, too.
Indeed.
This is a skill set that is in short supply right now.
It's highly in demand. It's a specialty. These crews are doing underground boring and drilling,
yes,
which is hard, leads us to some of the complexities
yes.
of underground drilling and boring. Okay, so what happens before we start work in a neighborhood? What's the process? The process at this point is that we've got designs and permit packages, and we've submitted them to the city or the town or the county. They've given us approval. And the first thing we do before we start any work is we call 811. Some people know this as call before you dig. This is a free phone number. It's a free service. It's nationwide. And before you even dig to plant a tree in your front yard, you're supposed to call 811. And what that does is it sends out a notification to every underground facilities provider in the area, and it gives them 2 days to come out and put paint and flags on where their underground facilities are. And the purpose of that is so we don't do things like hit water, sewer, power, and gas. It's a regulatory requirement of all underground facilities providers, and everybody works in tandem.
Which one is the hardest to locate of those utilities?
Sewers.
And why is that?
They're deep. They're often clay pipes, and because they're often so old, they don't have any easy way to trace them. There's no electrical tracer wire that allows you to trace them. New ones are typically required to have some type of tracer element added to them, but sewer laterals, the sewer service lines to homes, are the most difficult.
I've had homes all over the country, and I swear every home I've had to replace a clay line. That's right. In Denver, that's in Boston, that's in Texas, that's in Arkansas. It's like, I don't know when they put them in, but even I think the last one I replaced, if you hit it with a water hose, it would just like deteriorate. But if it sits there and it's working, it seems to work okay. But every house I've lived in,
they're prone to damage if the area around them, if they're old, or if the area around them is disturbed. And sometimes, our work, we disturb the area around all of these things. Sometimes they get damaged by tree roots. A lot of people would be familiar with that issue. But yes, so we don't want to hit any of them.
And so you have the locates. There's the things that you can do from the top of the ground, above ground. But there's other tools, right, for finding some of these utilities?
Yeah, they use two different types of technology. They use a locator wand, which would be used to locate underground elements that have a tracer wire. And then they use something called ground penetrating radar, which is...
that sounds terrifying.
It is. It's a kind of a radar, a piece of equipment that uses radar. It kind of looks like a lawnmower, and they're looking for cavities in the ground, which are then assumed to be sewer and water. They use maps along with them, so they estimate where they should be, and then they locate them using the ground penetrating radar, GPR.
And these things are typically how far beneath the surface? These different
utilities? They vary widely, so they can be anywhere from 1 to 2 feet to 6 feet down, depending on where you're working. So it's critical. When we pull a permit, usually to be in a specific at a specific depth, let's say 30 to 36 inches, and we choose that because that's typically going to be above other critical infrastructure like power, water, gas, sewer.
And Mears, I know Mears is our one of our largest partners, and they have an extensive safety program. They have a standard, which is one reason we picked them.
Right.
This is our safety standard. So even if the paint says, hey, the electric line's here, they don't just grab the Bobcat and start digging to China, right?
No. So before they start digging, they will what's called pothole. So they will dig a hole with a fence post digger or a shovel to expose the line that has been marked out. And if they don't find that line, which does happen, then we have to call the underground facilities provider to come back to try to help us find it, because it's their responsibility to tell us where it is.
Yeah.
So we lose a lot of time in production sometimes because we have to call them back to say, hey, where's this power line?
In a project of this scale, we're utilizing an enormous amount of resources for just locating utilities.
Absolutely. We could have 20 different crews working in a specific area, which means that we need locates done in front of all those crews on a daily basis.
Right.
And that means that gas, water, power, they all have to fulfill their obligations to locate their facilities.
And you've also we've started using, we are, at our cost, are hiring private locate companies to do this.
Yes, because the demand is so high for the service, it's hard to build fast enough. The other facilities providers are having difficulty maintaining the pace. So we've brought in our own private locate teams to augment, to help them locate their facilities so we can deploy the service faster.
Yes. But someone can put the paint. You can hire someone to do this. You can hire someone to do a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean it gets done exactly right. And they put the paint. They say, hey, the line's here. We pothole. Or we start digging and things happen sometimes.
Sometimes things happen. We try to avoid this at all times. There'll be times where they put no paint or flags in the ground, and we have no way of knowing that something is there, and then we hit something.
Right.
And that's bad.
That's bad.
Because that typically means that we're going to cause a disruption to a resident in the neighborhood. We could hit their water line. We could hit their sewer line. Even worse, we could hit their power line or gas line. This causes a safety issue for our crew. It can cause a safety issue for a homeowner. And so we take that very seriously and look to avoid that at all costs.
We're talking about things getting broke. It runs the gamut. So I think what's the most common problem that I think you're fixing these days?
The most common thing that happens is a broken sprinkler line. So these are things that are not marked out by underground facilities providers because they're homeowner owned. There's no way of understanding how they're run. And periodically we will break a sprinkler line. So we always recommend that after you've kind of seen us complete our work in front of your yard, maybe turn that sprinkler system on and see if you have any geysers in the yard. And if you do, it's
always the sprinkler head.
It's always that sprinkler. You could just call us at that number, 1-888-4-LiveOak, and hit option number 1, construction issues. And we're going to send somebody right out to repair that. Almost all of our construction and drop bury crews have sprinkler repair kits. I would say all of them, actually.
And they're good at it. I've seen them do it.
They do it all the time. They do it very quickly. It's a very inexpensive repair. It's $4 worth of material. They're quite quick and adept at doing it.
But it puts the homeowner at ease. Because there are some nice lawns.
Absolutely.
And lawns here can stay green all year long.
And we're building in places that are hot, and those
yes,
and that grass needs to be watered.
It does. It does. And we put the grass back.
That's actually a good thing to bring up, is that we are digging these holes in folks' yards, maybe to put a small ground level vault in. We don't put these huge green pedestals in people's yards. Everything's underground. It's surface level. And we do dig holes when we put those in. And we do dig small trenches in order to start our drills. And when that happens, we do our best to kind of put the soil back in and roll that sod back over. And if we don't do that to the homeowner's satisfaction, again, call us at that number, and we're going to come back and get it as close as possible to the way it was.
And these are the standards that we've set. We communicate this to our teams know this. Our partners know this. It just doesn't always communicate down, and that goes into the quality score, right?
That's right.
Of the team, and they've got to fix it. I think the other thing that you implemented was the team that breaks it has to fix it. Oh,
that's right. That's right.
Which is different. I mean, in other places, there's one team building, and I can't imagine this not causing a problem.
Well,
it's like the day shift. If you've ever worked in a factory, like I worked at night shift, the day shift guys blame the night shift guys, and vice versa. There's no It doesn't tie together.
Well, that's how we quickly find out where we have quality issues.
Right.
So if we have a neighborhood where a specific crew or crews are working and we're getting calls nonstop from that neighborhood and complaints, we realize we have a problem. So we get that crew to tighten up, or we ship them off.
Yep.
Yep. So because one of the things we always say is that we're not some headless mega corporation that's based in some other part of the country. Our headquarter offices are in our market. We are based here in Okaloosa County, Florida. We are based in Brunswick, Georgia. We live here and we work here.
We do.
Yep. So these are our homes, and these are our neighbors.
Okay.
Here we are.
So what are we doing in my yard? What are you doing in my yard? So one of the common things that I see all the messages, but a lot of times the homeowner sees a crew working in their neighborhood, and they want to go up and interact. They want to walk up and say, "Hey, I've got a problem," or "I have a question," and it's a crew. It's an active construction project. What's the best way to deal with that?
The best thing that you can do, if you see a supervisor there, you can contact the supervisor, but typically they're running equipment, and it's not safe necessarily to approach them while they're running this equipment.
It's heavy equipment.
It's heavy equipment. It's dangerous. There's like safety zones around them. The best thing you can always do if you don't see an obvious supervisor there is to call our main number, is 1-888-4-LiveOak, or also known as
888-454-8362.
And it's always going to be option number 1, construction issues.
First option.
First option. That's how important it is to us. It's before sales. It's before everything else. So because we know how much work we're doing and we want to respond to it. So call that number, leave a message, and we'll get back to you ASAP. It's a 24/7 line. If you absolutely need to engage with the crew, just ask for the boss or the supervisor, and they'll make sure the supervisor comes over. But we like to track any type of current concerns or questions, and so that number is always the best way to go.
Got it. We have people reach out to us, and this is a new thing because there's different channels. So the customer's on a channel, and by a channel I mean like maybe they're on Facebook, and they see something, and they communicate on Facebook. And what I wanted to convey is that, number one, we read all the messages. When I say we, there's a team of people that reviews these. Now, during the regular business hours, we can try to respond. But if it's after hours, it takes a little bit longer to do that. So we might get a Facebook message at 9 o'clock at night. We might respond to that, but not as timely as if it happened at 9 in the morning. And not as timely, I think this is important, if someone would call, if you called the 888-4-LiveOak number.
That's 100% right. We understand in this day and age that people might vent online, and we will respond to those. But the team that's responding to that is our social media, our marketing team, and they're immediately going to pass it over to the construction management team. But there is a lag, there's a delay. So the best thing they can always do is call that number. Then
you go right to the team that can fix it.
You're going to go right to the call center. They're going to take all of the detailed information, and they're going to send that directly over to the construction team.
So what's the process after they call 888-4-LiveOak? They hit option 1. They talk to us. What happens?
They're going to get to that 24/7 call center, say that they have an issue. They're going to take your name, phone number, address, details about your concerns, and they're going to send that right to the local construction team. That local construction team are people that live here. That live here and work here, and they're going to call you. They're going to ask more details about what the issue is, and they'll either go there directly at a time that's convenient for you, or send the construction crew over to address those concerns.
So I'm a homeowner, and there's two things that are near and dear to my heart: my sprinkler system and my yard.
That's right.
And so something goes awry when we're digging in their yard and the grass isn't as advertised, or the repair isn't as advertised. Talk a little bit about that part.
Sure. We talked about the disruption, the digging, and we maybe dig a trench and dig a hole. And we're doing this in all types of yards, all different types of grass, sand, soil, planting beds. And the goal is to get that back the way we found it. And sometimes when you dig a hole, you can't get it 100% back the way you found it. So probably the most common complaint that we get is, hey, you cut my sprinkler line, or this doesn't look as good as it should after you've done your work. Maybe the soil wasn't tamped down enough and they've got a high spot. Maybe the grass immediately started dying. Maybe there's sand where there was grass. And in those situations, we get that call and we're going to go out there and get it right.
So here's a question we get a lot. How'd you get permission to dig in my yard?
That's a good question. We pull permits. So we go through a lengthy design process. We work with the local municipality and we ask for their permission and get permits to build in the right-of-way or the utility easement in front of the homes.
Let's talk a little bit about easements. We say the word, and I said it at another part of our conversation. I could not tell you what the utility easement is at my house.
That's completely understandable. There's rights of way, ROWs, and utility easements. And these basically are parts of most properties where the municipality has a right, a legal right to put municipal infrastructure and other types of infrastructure. And that usually ends up being power, water, sewer, cable, telephone. It's how we get all the utilities to our homes.
And the local municipality sets that.
Yes.
So if someone wants to know what's the utility easement on my property,
they could call their local municipality. They could call the city or the county and say, how big is the right-of-way or the utility easement in my front yard? And they might tell you it's 5 or 6 feet, or they might tell you it's 35 feet.
Let's talk about that. So let's say I know in one of the areas that we're building in, it can be within, it's like 5 feet of the house.
That's right. And that's pretty extreme. And in all cases, we look to minimize the impact to the residents. So we're looking to construct and build our infrastructure as close to the road as possible. But sometimes other utilities are already there. Sometimes all the other utilities are there. So it's dictated to us on where we have to be. You have to be 10 foot into the yard because everyone else is closer to the road. And then we have to choose our depth depending on where the other utilities are. So ideally, we're typically somewhere between 30 or 36 inches, and that's so we can stay above other critical infrastructure.
And that's a good point, because sometimes we'll mark an area and we'll say these are the current underground utilities.
That's right.
But they could be at 60 inches.
That's right. And they tell us that. They'll say this is where water is, this is where sewer is, and folks might get concerned that we're crossing those painted lines, but we're crossing those painted lines. We're crossing that other infrastructure at a different depth.
Another question that comes up a lot is, how long are you going to be in my yard?
That's a great question that gets asked all the time. Typically, we can complete a section of street within a week. So in and out of there within a week. We might be in your yard for a day or two, and then come back a few days later to finish up some things. But that should be it. They should never be leaving open holes in the yard. If there is a hole, it should be protected. Maybe there's a piece of plywood over it, or netting and cones around it. If that ever happens, you should certainly call us. But in most cases, a few days here, a few days there over the course of a week to 10 days, and we move on.
So we talked a little bit about easements. You've got public easements, but there's also private roads. And predominantly, these are in homeowners associations. So you got a group of houses. They have an HOA association, and they own the land, so they own the rights to the property.
That's right. So that's a little bit different, but not too different, because at the end of the day, they own those roads, and it's perhaps a shared property, but they also own those easements. So before we build our infrastructure and bring our fiber optic network into an HOA, they have to agree. They have to let us in. So, but once they let us in, we work with them to understand where their easements are, if they know. And if they don't, we determine where all their utilities are. And then we present them with a design that says this is where we would plan to put the infrastructure, the fiber optic network, and they have to agree to that.
And we actually have a page for that on our site you can go to and get information about where, if you're in an HOA, what to do next.
That's right. And so far the demand has been there. It's a pretty straightforward process. We will send someone out to meet with the HOA team and management, and the demand is great. We haven't had any HOAs actually turn us away because everybody wants high-speed internet.
They want reliable internet.
Reliable, high-speed internet.
And back to what we kind of talked about in the beginning, it takes a while to build it right. It's not without its challenges. We could strap this stuff up. We could throw it on poles. We could put up some wireless solution. It's less than. And
this would be a lot quicker and cheaper if we just pinned this thing up to poles.
Yes.
But we're trying to do it the best way possible, so it lasts, so it's always up for our customers. And sometimes doing things the right way is hard and takes more time and more money.
Is there anything that people listening to this, I'm a homeowner, a resident in an area we're building, is there anything else that they need to know about you or your team?
The one thing I always emphasize is that, this is our home. We live here.
We do.
We work here. We're your neighbors, and we want to be your service provider as long as we're around. And so give us a call, and we care. So if you've got a question or a concern, we care, and we want to respond to it in a way that satisfies you. So that's our whole purpose here.
I think it's great. I've been in sales and marketing for most of my life, and what I really appreciate about Lou is that he is a sales and customer-focused service team. And our teams in other companies are typically at odds with each other. There's a significant amount of friction between like a sales team and a delivery team, and we don't have those problems.
No, that's right. I think it helped that before I became an operations focused person, I spent some time in sales. So I saw in marketing and saw what things were like on the other side of the fence, and how and construction and operations and it was not customer focused, where sales was very customer focused. So I took that lesson with me into operations to say it's all about the customer. Yes, I'm here building a network. Yes, I'm here doing construction. But at the end of the day, it's all about these residents who are our future customers, and they're our neighbors. And we want to make sure that we do the best job possible while we're doing that work.
One of the things that you also asked us to do is every employee at this company does a ride-along. Every employee, from the person that sits at the front desk to the office managers to sales and marketing to accountants. I think our CFO, Chris Bach, was on a ride out doing installs.
That's right. We're talking about our service delivery team,
yes,
our field technicians, and that's one of our huge differentiators that we have from other companies. There are our faces in the street. They're the folks that install our customers. take care of our customers in person if there's an issue. They're the ones who are going to make sure that all your devices are connected to the premium Wi-Fi before they leave. And they're the ones who are going to come back to your home if there's any issues at all. So these are the teams, the men and the women that are our feet on the street, and we feel that it's important that every staff member spend a day in their shoes so they can understand the difference that we're trying to provide when we interface with customers.
Another differentiator I'd like to point out is that our service tech, so we outsource our construction, which is what you have to do. You have to get scale because you've got to get a lot of people, moving, and then you're moving them around.
Yes, our focus is not to be a construction company. Our focus is to be a service provider.
And we provide, we have full-time employees that actually do the installation. That is not contracted out.
That's right. There's two components of the actual installation. There is a buried drop, which is the line that goes from the network near the street to the home. And we do work with trusted contractors to bury that line. But the final installation and all support is done by LiveOak Fiber employees.
And that is different than it is in a lot of other places.
Most cable companies will outsource that service to contractors. They might pull up with a truck that has their name on it, but it'll say contractor underneath it. And those folks are paid by the install and have very strict quotas. And our focus is not quota-driven. Our focus is service-driven.
And the majority of our employees, and even going forward, will be in this service delivery team.
That's right. That's right. The largest segment or the largest portion of our company will be the folks that provide service to the customers in the field.
And these are great long-term jobs too. This isn't you're going to be a field technician for the rest of your life, or we
pay well above the market to field technicians in each of our markets compared to the competitors, and there's room for advancement. We have a progression plan with our field technicians where they can become master technicians. The pay scale goes along with that, and it's great jobs. We train people from day one. Some of them come from the industry. Some of them are extremely experienced. Some of them come from other industries, and we will grow our own, as we like to say. But the folks that we have that have come from within the industry, from other providers locally, couldn't be happier that LiveOak actually cares about its customers. That's really one of the big differentiators between us and other providers, is that we actually care about our customers.
We do.
Yep.
We've had some challenges, I think, in the field over the last couple of months as we start to ramp this up. And this is something that you and I wanted to talk more about, as much as we can, be transparent about this process. It's a messy process.
We're doing a lot of work. Construction is hard. Sometimes it's messy.
I think it's always messy, whether you're doing fiber or you're having a sink replaced at your house. I can't remember a time that it wasn't messy.
That's right.
But your teams do a great job of leaving it better than they found it, as much as they can. But if people take anything away from this, if you've got a challenge, give us a call.
Call that number, 1-888-4LiveOak. Option number 1, construction issues.
That's 888-454-8362. Option 1.
That's right, Steve.